Okay, we are good to go. Now, I want to quickly introduce our next speaker. I met Richard in a conference, in a NATO conference for the CCDCOE, and there we spent a lot of time talking about, well, different things. I mean, he's now a principal researcher and a malware analyst at Google, formerly from Mandiant. Mandiant is now part of Google. In this talk, he will be focusing on how do we trust the IOCs, how do we analyze them, and how can we improve the overall ecosystem. With this, Richard, if you're ready, let's go.
I hope so. Thank you very much for the introduction. Happy to be here today. Thank you. I have a topic today I will speak about, which is unusual for my job title. As I was introduced, I'm a reverse engineer at Google's Flare team, and normally I do reverse engineering, and with reverse engineering we spot or identify indicators, and I was interested how those indicators are used. Before we start, short disclaimer, I will talk about and show some blog posts, and if I show them, that is not to say, oh, they could be improved. No. Those blog posts are mainly great and worth to be discussed, in my opinion. And so I want to show how to utilize blog posts for indicator assessment as well. On the other side, I show an approach which is not usual approach nowadays, and I will talk about indicators in a composite object way, which is also not usual and used frequently and seen often. So I was encouraged to speak about it by my leadership, but that is not, it's an ongoing research, so I feel sorry if it is not implemented yet at all. As a reverse engineer, I have to deliver some objects to the requesters. Normally, it is at least one report, code snippets, signatures, and, of course, malware processing artifacts, including IDBs, for example, if I use IDA Pro. So I was interested how these or those indicators are used after I identified them, because I'm part of the chain from malware or from data to the knowledge. So selecting data, transforming data, handing it over to intelligence departments, and they use it to build knowledge on it. The first question I think everyone will love about, but what is an indicator of compromise and what is an indicator? Normally, it is quite easy, I think. If I talk about indicators of compromise, I open any threat intelligence platform and I see there are a lot of hashes, isolated items. And that is what is described, for example, by CrowdStrike as well. An indicator of compromise is a piece of digital forensics that is gathered there. So it is from the past. It says this one system was attacked by one specific attacker in one specific campaign, for example. Then, what is an indicator of compromise? You will see common IOCs, such as cryptographic hashes like MD5, SHA-1, SHA-256. So I was really interested how those indicators match nowadays to certain attacks. And I went back in the history. When I started, there were no indicators of compromise. I'm quite old, I know. But then a PT1 report in 2013 was released, and there were composite objects as indicators of compromise, and they were reduced over time to single items. And Joe Slovic, for example, spoke about those composite objects and showed that those atoms which are used, or items, or building blocks, I name it, are not as atomic as they are thought of. So what happened then? we went over from the composite object to network-based indicators or signatures and host-based indicators and host-based signatures. And those were then used as indicators of compromise. Why that happened? To get them, it was much faster. To share it is much faster. It's more human-centric, database-centric, how you can share it. And this shift happened over time. And what we have lost with it, we lost, for example, the context of the indicator. What does the hash reflect? So, from the past history, what is the today's world? We see that the cryptographic hashes, which I mentioned, are coming from one specific attack in the past, and they are used for protection of companies. And if I look in the past, it was 13 years, 20 years ago, it was quite good when indicator or attackers did not change the tooling, did not adapt the tooling, did not change indicators inside. If I change anything inside the file, or if I add something to the file, the hash will of course change. Then I saw hashes are clustered by attack. That is quite good if I'm interested in intelligence. Who attacked me? But is the who attacked me really the way to say how I detect it? Because I can only say who attacked me when I identified it before that I was attacked. So that is also a shift of idea how to use indicators. I mentioned the next one, indicators are used often without context, and you will see why that is important in the next slide, I think, because I asked Gemini and ChatGPT, because I was told every good presentation needs AI. So then we have no capabilities, or nearly no capabilities, to check the quality of the indicators. If I have a hash which is not available, for example, in VirusTotal, I have no idea how to check it, if it is a good one or not one. If I look into reports, I have to trust the report and the authors. And sometimes the indicators are, or most of the time, the indicators are good. What happens if the hash in the report is wrong? Does not reflect what I expect. Then, the next thing that is a common problem. I do not like to talk about policies and guidelines because I'm the wrong person. But if I ask someone, if you have a hash, how often do you check it in your environment? One time, continuously, instantly, live, all 15 minutes? How often do you check it and how long do you check it? And that is important because we heard that indicators are shared from CERTs, from government, from private sector companies, and those are shared with you at the end, and you have to decide what to do with it. There is no guidance. And what happened over the years? 10 years ago, hashes were really great. Oh, they are still great. Don't think I'm against hashes. But they were good enough for detection, identification, so we built systems around it which detect hashes. Sysmon, for example, okay, Sysmon is a bad example because it can more, but Sysmon is widely used and mainly used for identifying hashes, cryptographic hashes. And so we built our systems around hashes and single item indicators, not only hashes, also URLs and so on. And then we built it around, and now if I say we should use it in a different way, we are limited what we decided a decade ago and what we built up in our systems a decade ago. And then there's a mathematical approach. That is something where normally everyone runs away. When I say indicators of compromise have often no weights, they are not, I cannot say if it is a good indicator. If it is an indicator, how does it tell me how certain I'm breached or not? And I will show a way to derive such weights from the execution chain. And with this knowledge or with this information I gave you in the past minutes, you will see that there is another related issues coming with it together. How to evaluate if a report is a good one or not. When I share a malware analysis report, a blog post with you, you have to decide if you want to utilize it or not. That means how good is the report itself, how good are the indicators inside of the report. Then the next thing, most of the reports are created for showing an attack, to show you what happened in the past, and so at the end you have the file identifiers used during that attack. And we have, of course, a changing threat landscape you heard in the morning in the opening session. And so with increasing amount of attacks, increasing amount of indicators, and so we have to decide how to go on that we can protect our companies. That is what I mentioned with ChatGPT. I asked ChatGPT if it's a cryptographic hash a good hash or not. And I asked, of course, Gemini as well, because I'm from Google. So what happened? Both told me, yes, but. I do not like these yes, but sentences. But it was correct, because it told me, without context, the hash could be not so good as thought. And that, if I look to the sharing reports from nearly every company, I see that mainly hashes are shared for detection, which are used initially for identification. Here, one thing, APT41, reported by Zscaler. Of course, we had a Google report as well, but I said I will honor also other companies who did a really good work. If you look there, you will see what happens. You have an initial attack vector, you have a legitimate executable, you have several hashes, file names, and a description. Quite good. With my bad PowerPoint skills, I changed the view a bit. So now we have the first file which delivers the next 3 files. It's music.zip. There we have a hash. Inside we have 3 files. So those 3 files are described in the report as well. But now we have the first problem. If we decide to think the file name is, I know Windows can handle uppercase and lowercase file names in the same way, but I write my detection and the file has slightly different format or uppercase, lowercase change. It could happen that it does not work. But that is, we have several approaches of it, and now look into the archive contains 3 files. The first file, taskhost.exe, launches the next DLL file. The next DLL file encrypts the .dat file and launches it as well. And on the right side, we see we have both DLLs which were found. One is adstrust.dll. The other one is the DLL you are seeing on the slide on the left as well. And it is executed or launched by a file which is called taskhost.exe, or it is by anlab executable. If I look into the report, I do not find the anlab executable. So I have no idea about the hash which executes this file. Probably I was misreading it, but I did not find it. Also, it is difficult to say now who executes it. And if I look to the archive, if I find the archive on my file system, do I have to check the 3 other files as well or not? Probably not. Because if it is there, that's not normal, that's malicious one, that's a suspicious file, and it contains the 3 others, so I do not have to do it. So, but what means, I think, yes, what means it launches, it decrypts and launches? That is more now my field, where I come from as a reverse engineer, because I'm interested to provide information. If I write down, it launches a file, it has several aspects of detection. The first thing you see on the left, if it says, use the Win API create file, it opens the file, it decrypts the buffer, it writes the buffer to the file itself, and then execute the file from the system, like we shall execute in command.exe or cmd.exe, then it is a different indicator set or detection mechanism. Then it has another approach, which is like iterating through the file system, identifying all files in a certain directory, decrypts them, and execute them. Execution in memory is also different. So what is really happening if I talk the file is decrypted and launched? And there we have the first approaches. One of the first approaches is the alignment of definitions. That sounds quite strange. I will tell about all three and explain why are they linked together. Then we have the understanding on context and usage-based definitions and static definitions. The difference is, look at DLL sideloading. What is DLL sideloading? It's a great term. If you ask 10 researchers will give you 10 different answers. Because it depends. It depends where the file was found in the context. If the file was delivered to the system and executed there, with a second DLL delivered as well, and it is in the search order, then we speak about DLL sideloading. If the file was not, or the executable was not delivered, if it was on the system before and executed by the user, and it has a higher hierarchy of the search order, we are speaking about DLL search order hijacking. That's the difference. But the terms were used in the past differently, so it was difficult to say what to spot, where to look, and what you see for, or need for detection. That is usage and static-based definition. The static-based definition is a definition which has no context. Like an executable is or in Windows executable is if you have an MSAT header at the beginning. So that is quite easy to spot. That's a static definition. And why are frameworks for integration with definitions so important? If you look at the definitions, how they are used, like DLL sideloading, you know which or where you have to look at and which artifacts to have to use to spot. You select the same data for the same definition all the time for data transformation at the end. Going back to the atomic indicators, that is Caddy Viper. I think everyone knows Caddy Viper. It is quite famous, I think, from the beginning of the war from Russia against Ukraine. And Hermetic Viper itself has different names. That's not the issue at the moment. But we had a high visibility at the beginning of the war. It has high impact, and every security company talked about it. How they talked was different. Look now. You have, for example, SHA-256 hashes, you have SHA-1 hashes, and MD5 hashes for the same situation. And you have now to think about what you are looking at and how to correlate. And correlating hashes does not work well. Except you have a platform like VirusTotal, you can look it up, you can correlate. Why is correlation so important? You take 10 reports, you have 30 different hashes. In reality, those hashes are only 10 files to identify, 3 hashes per file. That means you have only 1/3 of searches in your environment for the files. That would decrease or increase your performance or decrease the usage of your systems. That's quite important, I think. And the problem itself is that every company but spots different files. Not all have the same data set of files. Like first company spots 5 files, next 10 files, the next one 20 files. And that's quite difficult now to work with cryptographic hashes. And how to solve it is after the next problem. The next problem is, sorry. how to use the reports. And there's a good approach from Christian Dietrich. He's a professor in Germany, and he tries to evaluate reports by the quality, and this time for attribution. And he used the MICTIC framework of Timo Steffens. This is a good approach, but we do not have those approaches so much. And we only can use, because I was always told, use AI to evaluate reports. AI can evaluate reports or data if it is good data. Of course, it could evaluate all data, but if the data quality is bad, the result of the AI system probably is also not so good as expected. So this is a good approach. There was a first step how to do it, and I think he's evaluating it. He did a good research, and we have to go on with it. Now, the problem with the hash. Why I want to go away from the hash? That is not because I think that it was a mistake at the beginning. If you look at the stage 1 PowerShell dropper of Ghost Emperor, I do not want to say Ghost Emperor the same like Famous Sparrow, because there are probably slightly differences between namings because of the data you're looking at. But the stage 1 PowerShell dropper has a MD5 hash. If I look up the MD5 hash in VirusTotal, what happens? Oh, that's for you the left one. You see 37 detections, but you do not look at the PowerShell dropper. You look at a completely different file, because the hash in the report was wrong. The report itself was great, but it took time because you could evaluate out of the report the correct hash of the dropper. And if you look there, only 3 AV engines detect the hash. And that was then changed by the attacker by one wording. They exchanged the wording AES managed through the base64 encoded wording. And then the detection was only 1. And that was 2 years later, after the file was used. We have 1 detection for the correct hashes 1 year later. That's quite low. And this brings me to how we should handle indicators a bit better in the future. We have, of course, cryptographic hashes like MD5, SHA-1, SHA-256, but we have also similarity hashes. Similarity hashes are organized in different categories like block-based hashing, context-triggered piecewise hashing. And the second one of the prominent or well-known mechanisms using CTPH is SSDeep. But that is looking at the whole file. But looking inside the file, now probably everyone will leave the room, because I say rich header is also great. And I was told, oh, rich header, oh, you know, Olympic Destroyer, the rich header was faked, and it was removed. And no, it was changed. That's the first thing. And the second thing is mainly the rich header is correct. It is not really faked often, so it is more a threat profiling attribute than a misleading artifact. And the rich header has several researchers. One is Peter Kalnay from Asset. He did research on the rich header, and the other one is Julian Kirsch. And Julian worked on similarity of rich header information, and he did quite well with it. And I feel sorry to say it is not often used nowadays, but the rich header is still a good indicator. If you look, for example, at a Themida packed file, you use the rich header because the rich header is not changed. And you take it over to VirusTotal and look there for the rich header as well, you will find often the unpacked version of the file as well, based on the rich header information. And then you can analyze the unpacked file and then use it to say the breakpoints for my indicators as that offsets or that functions, and you set the breakpoints there, and you can directly find your indicators of, which you will use for your report. So we have several methods, like Yara, like strings, capabilities. What string is a good string? That is one of the main questions. But also we will look at it. What is a good string? But you see now, only relying on hashes or single item indicators is not the best approach. And Yara was a good approach for similarity, but Yara has a big problem. No, it's not a problem. It is intended. It is a good program. If you use it in an intended way, it is doing great work. But it is used for several aspects: for hunting, for detection, for digital forensics, for malware triage. So you have different purposes and accuracy and detailed levels how you can use Yara. And that you should know if you use Yara for your detection in your production environment. For example, this rule is meant for hunting. It's not tested to run in a production environment. Probably you should not use it. But also, which files I will spot with it is also not described. What was the time when the file was created? That brings me to meta information of indicators. The meta information are really essential. And the second thing is, how often are those rules maintained and updated? They are created for a blog post, for a first triage system, for your tooling and your production, but how often are those updated? And the third thing is, what happens with a Trojanized file? Like, you have a file which has a legit component and you put the malicious code on top of it. And now you write a Yara rule, but you don't know which is the Trojanized part and which is the malicious part. And if now the Trojanized or the legit part changes, but the malicious part is still the same, you will not spot all the new files. This brings me to some techniques, like APT41 report. On the left side, you see what we have in our blog post. This time I used the Mendy and Google blog post. On the left side, you see all the hashes included as host-based indicators. What I did, I used Moonin, a tool from Florian Roth, quite old tool, but still a really great tool, open source available, and I used it to gather or to search in VirusTotal, in Malware Bazaar, and different sharing platforms if the files are available. So I created the table around, and I saw there most of them, I have not only one hash, I have all three hashes. And additional to them, I have similarity hashes as well. So first step, using Moonin. Second one, looking at similarity. Here is the similarity overview. And with the similarity overview, I saw I can reduce many of them by only using the similarity hash. And the imp hash, for example, is available in Sysmon, and you can use it. So you can reduce your results as well. Third thing. Second, I was a bit lazy. I thought I'd click on the link in the report to look what happens. So I was guided to the VirusTotal collection, and I saw the VirusTotal collection includes of the missing files, of the 5 missing files, not the MD5, but the SHA-256 hash. So I had more hashes to correlate now and was able to use them. So know your tools, and VirusTotal is a great tool. Then I built a compound structure out of it. That is more a tree-like structure. I started with the hashes, and I bubbled it up what was identical. Like the imp hash was identical and the rich header hash was identical. So I was able to say those 3 files has not to be tagged if I use another sharing, like similarity hash sharing indicators. And if I add it to it, I have more context. So you see, my indicators look like more a tree structure. The problem with this tree structure, let me have a look. I have still minutes left. That's great. Is also good, but not good enough. You will see where the tree structure will probably fail a bit. First riddle of the day. Is the imp hash enough for detection? That is something you should think about. If you use Sysmon and you want to spot those 3 files, you can cluster those 3 files by the imp hash. Why does it match? Oh, this SSD, for example, hashes only one of them. The similarity hash SSD tells me only one of the files is identical. The others are not identical to the first file. Why? I think they contain the same. Is now the imp hash and or the rich header PE or the rich header hash more precise than the SSD hash? And that is not the case. This time it is the case. Why? The file is quite small. It has only 40 kilobytes. And one is the 32-bit version, and the other one is a 64-bit version. So you can use, for example, the imp hash and the rich header hash to spot now both versions, the 32-bit and the 64-bit. That is great. Sometimes, as I mentioned, bubble it up what is identical, build a tree structure, and share it. Why is the tree structure a problem? Because it is not human brain-centric, and on the other side, the tree structure does not fit in an SQL database. And normally, we share IOC in a database format. And to the indicator sharing, some considerations. Add meta informations to the indicators you share. That is, for example, the status. When it was developed, is it tested, is it in production, when was it updated, what was updated, add a comment to it. That's a tuple where you can add those informations. You have the severity and how often the search recommendations, the reference where you take it from. That is really important to know where comes this hash from. Comes it from a public report? Probably a report you do not trust. Then you know probably I should recheck it before I use it in my environment. For example, if you use a hash which is a good file or legit file, and it was used in the attack, but you use it as well in your complete environment, and on every system, then you search for it, and every system will be shown as infected. That is probably not the good situation. Then add file type information. The operation system. It is for Linux, it is for Mac OS, it is for Windows, or it is application specific, like a PDF file. Add the architecture, the file type itself. It is a PE executable, PEDLL. Then the source, where comes this file from? Use the file identifier and similarity information. With this, you can put all what you've seen in the tree in a normal SQL dataset. And then you can share it. But additionally, I would recommend to add the tree or the graph itself as well as one data blob. This brings me, what hash is the best hash now? This is a discussion I heard so often. Is SHA-256 better than SHA-1 or MD5? And this brings me to, it's a mathematical situation. I can calculate how probably is a collision of a SHA-256. But sometimes I see that some hashes are not able to correlate. The standard format of the NSLR list, for example, uses MD5 and SHA-1. So you should use normally all hashes for correlation as well. And that is what you should bring to the companies and governmental institutions, public sector institutions who share the information with you. Why? That is, one person or one organization who shares has only do the time once. If I share to the companies like a snowball, every company at the end who gets this information has to do the attribution and enrichment on its own. And that is quite time-consuming. If it is done once at the beginning, it's much easier, and mainly the persons at the beginning have all those informations. The companies at the end probably do not have it. And that brings me a bit to the path of the future. My opinion is it is better to add a composite structure or a composite object again as IOC, at least at the meta information. Then use similarity for clustering. Because in detection, it is not important, as I mentioned in the beginning, that you use, for example, which attacker attacked me. It's a later process. It's for intelligence gathering at the end when you spotted it that you were attacked. Then convince the providers to add more context. Ask the providers for more context. And how often, if you request 10 times a day from a company you're using that threat intelligence platform to add more context to the IOC, what happens? At a certain point of time, they have to do it automatically because they have no time to do it manually. So they will share it in advance. Then movement from identification to really detection purpose of reports. That is, for detection, the better way. Then the more context, of course, and the weighting. That's really important. And that brings me to the second riddle for your time at home then, after sharing the slides. I will also share the hashes, by the way. If I use the rich header, I get those 3 hashes. What are you looking and tell a story about it? Because those 3 files are, let me have a look, near miss. Near miss, you have seen before, kill disk, hermetic wiper. And what is the story behind? One is not detected, for example, as near miss. But all of 3 are part of the near miss evolution chain. So my recommendation, look at it, and there you will identify why, for example, similarity is better than only relying on cryptographic hashes. So add context to your hashes, please. Also to CERT institutions who shares indicators of compromise, because that helps to protect all companies around the world. Before I show you something with the strings, here some acknowledgement. Of course, the first thing, BB, thank you for being invited. I hope next time again. And on the other side, there are several researchers, also from Peter Kalnay from ESET. Thank you very much for your rich header help. And also other persons who drank a lot of coffee with me to create the presentation and find the correct files. So thank you very much. Do I have 5 minutes?
5 minutes? It's between you and lunch, right?
Okay. Who wants to go to lunch? No one. Thank you. Thank you very much. No. I will share as video what I want to share with the strings, how to identify a good string, how to bubble it up. I will share this video after the presentation. If you are interested, send me a link, or I send it to BB and he can share it.
We can play the video during the lunchtime.
Okay.
All right. I would like to also use the opportunity to ask a few questions. Maybe let's start with the audience as well. Are there any questions from the audience? Okay, while the audience is warming up.
There's one question from the audience.
Oh, there is. Let's go with one.
Hello, thank you for a great presentation. My name is Ricardo Juncha, and I'm coming from Montenegro government, CERT.
Close.
Your opinion on the IOCs, do you think that is a dead concept in modern cybersecurity? Because considering the advancement in techniques and use of advanced analytics, does IOCs still hold a relevant role in threat detection?
Okay.
Coming from like the first point of view of institution, when they get the IOC, is that too late because they're in that perspective? Thank you.
Okay, now I have to think about the answer correctly to be political correct. But my manager knows I'm never political correct, so I apologize. So I think the indicators are valid and they are good for second line of defense, for detecting if I'm breached, if I add context, like behavior. I can add behavior to IOCs. Like I say, the structure tells me my first indicator is a zip file or an email. The email contains a zip archive. The zip archive contains and drops to disk. Then if I have this chain, I can use the chain for detection. then it is useful. A single hash could be changed a lot, but on the other side, if you do not check and it's delivered, for example, from the public sector and you are breached at the end and you are asked, have you checked the hash? And you said no, probably you will have a larger problem. But I think the concept is quite old. It is a good concept, but it should be added, it should be improved, and it has not improved over years. That is my personal opinion. So please apologize to everyone who listens to me and has another opinion.
Just a question from my side as well. You talked about the similarity hashes,
yes.
right? And we know that the statically linked binaries or Go binaries, they will have all the libraries built in, which might constitute the majority of the code, right? Which in the end might be, you might be matching other code with the same libraries that are included.
That is also a good question, and yes, there was some report outside, I think it was at the beginning of the Russian-Ukrainian war as well, that one company told us that a Viper has a high similarity to a Chinese actor ransomware threat group, where I thought, oh great, and they used, as you mentioned, the statical linked libraries for simulation. So 80% of the library was, or of the code was identical, and only the user-created code was different. So high similarity. But that is the reason why I mentioned different similarity approaches. And for example, you have different, like the rich header, which is only taking a part of the information. You also could use information which Go binaries are used by the Go binary itself to correlate the modules or the package which are used and out of the functions. Then you go more inside the functional similarity. This can also be used. But there are several similarity approaches outside. And what I mentioned, for example, the SSD hash was not similar, even if it is a similarity hash over the whole file. So probably you can also go to the code similarity itself, where you only look at the main functions, the user-written code.
All right, thank you. With this, let's give a round of applause to Richard.